Whenever. Ready to go?
Yeah, we're good.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Blankenburg. I have the good pleasure of kicking this day off, which means I've got the butterflies and all the other stuff that goes with starting a conference off, which is fun. I want to let you guys know Mike is going to talk about every speaker as they come up, which is really nice. He was very kind. It's usually full of insults for me. It was very nice of him to talk up like that. But we have a very high bar as far as speakers go today. And I want to let you know at least half of us stayed at the Holiday Inn Express last night, so we should be set to go. That's a really, really good sign. But my talk today is called How to Learn, and I spent a lot of time thinking about what I should call this talk, right? It's a little bit about learning, it's a little bit about focusing on your career, it's a little bit about making sure that you are as good as you can be in your industry. And so this was the talk I landed on. One of the other ones I thought about using, though, was why learning is important. I think a lot of people, after they get out of school, kind of forget that. And I really wanted it to be impactful. I wanted a title that really sold what this thing was about. Another one that I wrote really large was how to stay employable, right? This is another thing that I hope everybody in the room is thinking about all the time, is how do I stay relevant in my business? How do I continue to move forward? And so ultimately I settled on how to learn. That's where I landed. But what I want to start this session off with is a talk about a guy named Tom. This is Tom. So with Tom, what we have is, this is a family friend of mine. I didn't actually use his photo, but he looks kind of like this guy. And the idea here is that I have an old family friend. He's about 50, 52, and he has spent his entire career as a COBOL developer. 30 years he's been a software developer. He's been really good at it. But he came to me the other day. He knows I work for Microsoft, and he said, what do I do? I can't find work. I can't find something that I can do. If I do find work writing COBOL, it's a 3-week thing to go fix some issue that somebody has. But nobody's doing new COBOL development. That's just not something you generally see. And I had a long conversation with him about how, did you have opportunities? Could you have spent time learning and keeping up with stuff? And he said, yeah, but I didn't see the point. Tip number 1, don't be Tom. Okay, that's my number 1 message. The message I want to have for you is that you should learn something every year. You should focus and create a list. I have a colleague of mine, his name is Brian Prince, and he once told me a story about how every year, on whatever his anniversary date is for the job he's currently working at, he sits down and he makes a bunch of lists and commitments and stuff to himself. He will write a list about all the things he wants to accomplish that year. He also makes a very specific decision about whether or not to continue doing the job he's doing today. Right? He spends a lot of time thinking about that. But in our learning context, I really want to talk about learning something new every year. Learning a new language, learning a new platform or technology or whatever it is, but broadening your horizons from whatever it is you do today. And one of the common things I get, because I tell people this all the time, is you should try this, you should learn this thing, you should go out and do that. I get this. I don't have any time. I don't have time to go do that. I have my job, and I have kids, and I have everything else. I don't know how better, I didn't feel right saying this, but Patrick Stewart, he kind of feels like that's bullshit. You have time, right? And you have lots of time. What you don't have is a priority. You're not making it a priority in your life. And I am lifting this completely from a conversation I had yesterday with Leon on the way here, who you'll see later. But think about this for a moment. You want to learn, you want to keep being employable, you want to have new technologies at your ability to use. What if we took time out of the scenario? Now what's keeping you from learning? What is the thing now that's in the way? Now it's, well, I don't really feel it, or I don't really want to, or it seems so hard, or I'm not sure how to do it. Hoping the rest of this talk will help you with that. But I want you to think about that a lot. You have time. What you choose to do with your time may not be what we're talking about today. But that's a really, really important thing to think about, is that if you prioritize it, you can make it happen. So here's a great example of that. Every time I go into a restaurant, I open the menu and I go to the salad section. And I look for a really nice, healthy looking choice. This salad looks good, it's got all the stuff I like, it sounds like it's gonna taste good, and it's pretty healthy for me, right? What ends up happening, though, is by the time the waitress comes to the table, is I end up ordering the double-decker cheeseburger with bacon on a Krispy Kreme donut, right? Like that's the thing I end up choosing. And this is actually a longer story though, and the reason for it is, this equates exactly to what I was talking about a second ago. In your career, it's very easy to say, I don't need to do that right now. I don't need to learn that other stuff right now. I have a job, I'm writing code in this language, and everything's great. I'm getting the money that I like, and everything seems fine. Going back to Tom, much like my health, I am making short-term concessions. I don't need to eat that salad now. I don't need to worry about my health now. I can lose weight later. I can do all that stuff later. But what you end up finding is that much like Tom, if you spend 30 years not really learning, just continuing to use the same skills and knowledge that you have today, it is going to be so much harder to learn then because you haven't even been practicing the learning part of it, right? It's not that you don't know the technology. Now you've also forgotten kind of how to learn, how to immerse yourself in that. That's my donut burger story. I've never actually had one of those, but it sounds awesome. So remember tip number one, don't be Tom. Don't be a guy that just lets it slide and continues to think, I can do that later. You can, but it's going to be way harder. Okay, so learning takes on different forms. It's a little bit of a history lesson about how we learn and kind of how society looks at learning in general. So elementary school, it's a little washed out, but it says circa 1986, if you're caring how old I am. I went to a tiny little elementary school just outside Cleveland, and this is the actual page from my 5th grade yearbook. I'm up here at the top, and the interesting thing about elementary school, and perhaps even middle school to some degree, is that you spend all of your time learning from a teacher. You go to the school because the stuff you need to know is in the teacher. It's multiplication and your alphabet and all those kinds of things, right? That's what you learn in elementary school. And you go there because the teacher has that knowledge. There isn't a great wealth of resources out there, especially for someone that's 8, 9, 10 years old, to go do research on how to do multiplication, right? You go to a teacher because she imparts that knowledge upon you. The teacher down here is highlighted by a star. And just as a little side note, as I was going through the sheet, this has nothing to do with the presentation at all. According to the statistics, there was a 10% chance I was going to jail because those 3 people did. I think that's absolutely remarkable. Anyway, so high school learning, it takes a little bit of a turn. You're not going to the school, you're going to school, but the teacher's not the one that has all the knowledge. Now they expect you to go find the knowledge and then share it back with them, right? So as you go to high school, you have to go write papers, you have to go to the library, today you have to use the internet. This says 1994, there wasn't a whole lot of internet then in 1994. And so what I did when I wrote a lot of papers was I used the print version of Wikipedia. That worked really, really well. And so I dug through encyclopedias and I found books in the library and I would have to do research. I would have to go through the process of learning. And then we got to college. College was 1994, which when I graduated high school. And in 94, that's when the internet really started to take shape, right? Finally, the internet was here. I had all this wealth of information and resources. It was awesome. It was divided into 19 categories for me, and I could look at any one of those categories for what was on the web. It was great. This is Yahoo from 1994. That's what it looked like. This is an infinitely better way to find information, but what we're doing is research. And the big challenge we have today is not where's the information, it's oh my god, there's so much information, what's the right stuff? How do I use this appropriately? And so if we look at this, today the amount of information available grows by 50% a month. Think about that. Another number that I don't have on a slide here is that every single year since 2003, humanity has produced as much data as we ever produced up to 2003. That's madness. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. You guys recognize a lot of these words? The internet right now is 500 exabytes. That's about the size of the internet. They're estimating in 8 years. 8 years, that's nothing. Then it's going to be 35 zettabytes. I can't even fathom how large that is. I know I have some terabyte hard drives, and that seems huge. This is an immense amount of data. How do we get through it all? And it gets worse. Stuff that was current 2 years ago is out of date. These are perfect examples, right? These are all things that 2 years ago we were using without even thinking about. And now you're using a table-based layout? You're writing an app in Flash? Like, those are questions now that we ask and say, what do you think? But 2 years ago, it seemed perfectly reasonable to have someone do that. For those of you that are students in the room, what this means, especially in the technology world, is that the stuff you learned your sophomore year is out of date by the time you graduate. I mean, that's really, really hard. You have to try and find a way to keep up. There's no way to just skip ahead and figure out what it's going to be. I would do that. So you need to keep up. This is my personal statement. Everybody does things differently, but when I think about learning new technologies, when I think about how I'm going to best use my time, I don't read technical books. I wrote 2 technical books that I haven't read. I don't read technical books. I use them as reference. If I need to look up a piece of information, absolutely, I will dive into a book. I have a whole library of technical books. I rarely read websites. We were talking yesterday, I think Joe said, I don't read blogs. Like, I don't have time for that. I have a lot of stuff going on. That is not a priority for me. Remember, time is priority. But I rarely read websites as well. I will go search for stuff when I know what I need. But I don't just go looking for the snippet of code that's going to answer my problem, right? I need to figure it out. I need to learn. Those are reference material. Reading is not knowing. So when you sit down and you read a technical book, or you sit down and you read someone's article, you don't know how to do that thing. You now know what that guy did in his scenario. That's really, really different. Knowing how the technology works, knowing how to take it apart and use it, that's learning. A great example of this is thinking about my daughter. She's 8 years old, and I still have yet to get her to ride a bike. I feel like a horrible father that I'm even admitting that to anyone. But she doesn't ride a bike yet. She's happy to get on it and try. But I've got my hand under the seat and one on the steering wheel, on the handlebars. And if I let go of any of that, she's going to the ground. She just leans with her shoulders, and it's a bad. She's not practicing it well, and I'm not very good at teaching her. So I thought, well, if we think about reading as the way people learn, well, then I can just give her this, right? I mean, riding a bicycle. Here we go. Sit on a bike facing forward, pedal clockwise to make the bike go. Rotate your handlebars to turn and have fun. That's all you need to know, right, to ride a bike. It's much, much more than that. If you just give them this card and go, you're going to end up with this, right? You're going to end up with a kid on the ground that's upset. Instead, put the kid on a bike. Just let them practice. Let them fail. Let them learn from their mistakes. Oh, I just figured out that if I lean with my shoulders, I fall to the ground. That sucks. So let's figure out a way to fix that. Let them fall. You can let them practice. They can get it eventually, but they have to practice it. You can't just tell them how to do it, right? So tip number 2, learning comes from mistakes, not memorization. And this is a hard thing for us in American educational society to really get our heads around. I lazy load knowledge. Until the absolute last minute that I need to know something, I'm not going to bother with it. But when that problem addresses itself, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to figure out how this stuff works. In fact, I used to have a system, and my system was do stuff as late as possible. I had a college roommate who was a good friend of mine in high school, and we got accepted as freshmen. I went to Bowling Green State University, it's just south of Toledo, and we got accepted into like an honors English class, right? We were both going to school to be journalists. And it was this awesome English class, and we sat down on the first day, and the way the semester was set up, every Friday you had a paper due. And the whole class was on bioengineering of food, right? So all the weird stuff they do to our food. And so every week you had to do a research paper and write it and turn it in. And we sat down that first week, and we wrote our papers early and did multiple drafts and turned them in, gave them to each other, and proofread and did all the other stuff, and turned them in, and we both got C's. And it was like, this is awful. And so we ended up spending a little more time on this. We're really down about it, but kind of put it off and put it off and put it off. And the night before the paper was due, we sat down and said, we should really get around to writing these things. So we did. We wrote them in. We wrote in shifts. You'd sleep for an hour, and then you'd get up and write for an hour, and you'd kind of swap on and off. It was a great, stupid system. But it worked, and we turned those papers in. No proofreading, no editing, no anything. Turned them in. A's. And that happened the rest of the semester. We had figured out a system, right, that worked for us. I don't recommend it for everyone. Last minute doesn't always work for everyone, but we found that last minute pressure made us better at what we did. Another example of a system is taking tests like this. where you have to memorize a whole bunch of stuff, right? This isn't learning, like I said. This is memorization. And what I would do is I would sit down, this is kind of a dark picture, but I would sit down and I would specifically, I knew that I was going to cheat on this test. I was going to make a cheat sheet, and I was going to tuck it in my pocket, and when I needed it, I could pull it out. Now, it wasn't this size, right? It was maybe just a little quarter, but you could write every geometry function on it, all the stuff that you needed to know for the test. And I wrote it all down, and I had it all, and the first time that I did this, I had it sitting on my desk the night before the test. And I got up in the morning and I got dressed and was running around, running late for school, and I forgot to take it to school with me. And after I took the test, I was like, wow, that was really easy. Because I knew all the stuff. I had spent so much time coming up with a clever little sheet of paper that gave me all the answers, all the formulas, how everything worked, and make sure that I had all the right information. What I had really done was immersed myself in the information, immersed myself in what I needed to know, so much so that I knew I knew how to do it, and I didn't need the cheat sheet. This is the problem with our schools today, and this is not working out too well with the sun, but I have a big pie chart right here that's mostly memorization and a little bit of problem solving, right? About 5% when we think about school. Very rarely are you doing a lot of problem solving in schools. You're doing math problems, but you're really just memorizing what 6 times 4 is, or what the Pythagorean theorem is, or whatever it may be. In real life, this completely switches. Memorization is overrated. Can you solve problems for us? Can you make our business better? Those are the people that succeed in our society. So today I have a project. I have an RSS reader. It's very, very simple if you think about what an application is. It goes out, it grabs an RSS feed, it displays the data on a screen, it allows me to tap on it and read the data from that RSS feed. But I build that application, and every time that I want to learn something new, I use this same problem set. It's a really, really simple application, and you can make up whatever yours is, calculator, tic-tac-toe, whatever it may be. But the reason I like an RSS reader is because it forces me to learn how to communicate with the internet. I have to build out class structure. I have to be able to pull data in. I have to, query data. There's a lot of little pieces that fit into what goes into an RSS reader. In the last 2 years, I've built that RSS reader on 8 different platforms. And it's because I wanted to. I wanted to learn this stuff. I wanted to know how it works. And you can see I've spent a lot of my time in the mobile space. But I built it for Windows. I built it in Silverlight. I built it for all sorts of different platforms because I wanted to know how that stuff worked. And I already knew the problem set, right? I didn't have to figure out how the app worked. I had to figure out how the platform or the language or whatever it is. So this is my recommendation. This is my takeaway for you. Spend some time thinking up a cool little easy project to build and do it for anything you want to learn so that you don't have to figure out the problem also. Learning only happens when you want it to. If you don't want to go to school today, if you don't want to learn this stuff, you're not going to. If you don't have an interest, if it's not a priority, it's not going to happen. No excuses. You can't see that picture, but it's a baby pulling a giant dumbbell. No excuses, right? So tip number 3, just do it. You have to just go do it. And I hate to steal this from Nike, but it just makes sense. You have to just go do the thing. Another title I wanted for this presentation was just a swift kick in the ass. Right? That's what you need sometimes, is a reminder that if you continue to put this off and put this off and put this off, you're eventually going to be that 500-pound guy that can't get out of his house because you kept eating the Krispy Kreme burger. Right? You don't want to be that guy. You don't want to get yourself to a place where you can't get back. So one final thought, and then I'll wrap and answer questions or whatever. When in doubt, use more bacon. Thank you. Any questions? I have a few minutes left. Pretty concise. Yes, question in the back. The stuff that I use generally is I will go download. Let's use Android as an example, because that was all new to me, right? I knew Java a little, but I hadn't spent a lot of time with it. I had never used the tooling or any of that. What I did is I went and downloaded the SDK and I started playing with it. I opened Eclipse. I started playing with the tools and just kind of trying to find my way around. Some of it was just intuitive, and I think that's just because I have some experience with Windows Phone, which is very similar in a development model. So I understood some of that, but ultimately what it comes down to is, much like my RSS reader, I know the things that I want to do, right? I know that I'm going to need to create a class at some point. I know that I'm going to need to communicate and get some kind of web data. And so I'll spend the time to investigate those problems. But what I definitely do not do is go to a guy's blog, find his code, and paste it. Right? That's off my list. That's not learning. At that point, I've just copied and pasted his code. So I look at how he approached his problem, why he did the things that he did, or she. I apologize for continuing to say male. But I use that information to then grow my knowledge. But I'm always retreating from the web or from the book to try and figure out how and why it works. If the tools or the information have things like IntelliSense that give me some hints and clues along the way, awesome. Makes it a whole lot easier. And it makes it a lot easier to kind of explore and see what else I could do or what other things are in there. But like I was talking about earlier, you have to immerse yourself in it. You really have to take the next step and just dive in. And I'm not saying that you do this in an evening. You're not going to sit down and learn Android development in an evening or a week. This could be a 3-month, 5-month project. It's done when you have time. And I can completely appreciate it. I have 2 kids. I travel a lot for work. I understand that there's a limited amount of time. But I also know that I watch a decent amount of TV, and I play a little The Old Republic sometimes, and I like my Xbox. And there are times that I could be playing Modern Warfare and sniping people in the head without question. I'm actually pretty good at that. But on the flip side, do I need to spend all my time doing that? Couldn't I have taken one of those evenings this week instead of shooting people and instead spent some time learning something, right? And so I really try to give myself at least one evening a week where I spend just going through it. But to answer your question, I rely on those resources heavily, but only when I can't figure it out myself. Yes? Completely agree. And you see the same thing with a lot of Microsoft's platforms as well, where they'll have, Windows Phone's a good example, right? When you install the SDK, you get 9 different templates from which to start a project. There's only one that you would really want to use to start a real project. The rest of them are examples, much like with the Android stuff, of things you could do or ways you could approach the problem. And they're good ways to take it apart and see examples, but it's all about getting your hands dirty. You're not just going to be spoon-fed, here's how you do this, right? That doesn't exist. And if it does, someone was solving a problem for their scenario that may or may not actually apply to yours. So the copy and paste codes is something I try to avoid almost always. Anyone else? All right, thank you guys so much for listening.